Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about the Scarborough RT line. A couple weeks ago I did a video on its unbuilt sister line, the Etobicoke RT, so I might as well just complete the set. So let's get into the video. The story of the Scarborough RT begins in the early 1970s, when the then borough of Scarborough was planning its future downtown core. This downtown core would be located on McCowan Road by Highway 401. At the time, Metro Toronto Council had been discussing an extension of the Bloor Danforth subway, today Line 2, to Kennedy Station at the intersection of Kennedy Road and Eglinton Avenue East. Officials in Scarborough wanted the subway to be extended further into Scarborough to connect to the borough's planned downtown. However, Scarborough officials saw the high cost involved with such a project and decided a cheaper option would be needed. For comparison, the cost of the one-stop extension from Kennedy to Wharton in 1970 costed around $41 million. That is around the equivalent of $92.4 million today in 2020. Planners at the time cautioned that most areas of Metro Toronto weren't dense enough to support full subway-level service, and those areas that were already had subway service. That said, planners also saw the value in bringing rapid transit to areas like the planned Scarborough Town Centre and wondered what type of service would bring the best value to the area without costing the same amount of money as a subway. At the time, planners saw a subway's capacity at around 20,000 passengers per peak hour, while the streetcars was around 5,000 per peak hour, so the question became what could bridge the gap between the two technologies. While that was going on, the TTC had its own preferred solution to the problem, and that was a streetcar line that would use its own dedicated right-of-way, what we would today call an LRT line. The inspiration for this likely came from similar services seen in cities like Boston and Philadelphia, such as the Ashmont-Mattapan high-speed line in Boston and the Norristown high-speed line in Philadelphia. The line would have used linked-together CLRV streetcars to form multi-car trains, an idea that would carry over into the proposed Etobicoke RT, which was being talked about at about the same time, and you can find a link to a video I did about that in the top corner and in the description down below. With that, the TTC set out its proposal, so let's look at it in a bit more depth. The proposed line and the final line that was built follow the same alignment predominantly, following the CN Uxbridge subdivision, now the GO Stouffville line, although the TTC did propose some alternate alignments as well. The first phase of the line, which was to run for about 13 kilometers, was expected to cost $85 million in 1970s money, which would be around $482 million today. This was roughly 40% of the cost of a full subway following the same alignment. The line was to start at the newly built Kennedy Station, which opened on November 22, 1980. Here, the line would connect with the Bloor Danforth subway line, as well as various bus routes from points east. It's worth noting that the original designs for Kennedy Station called for their RT platforms to be open to the elements, with the roof coming later in the design. It's also worth noting that the roof over the tracks is higher than that of over the platforms. While this is pure speculation on my part, I believe it was built like this to allow the necessary clearance for the overhead catenary. I base this claim off the fact that Kennedy Station's RT platforms were built for a streetcar line. This is seen by the existence of the original streetcar platforms still being visible and the large turning loop west of the station. The change from light rail to light metro occurred very late in the project's development. As part of the original proposal, the TTC proposed a possible mid-block station between Kennedy and Lawrence East stations. This station may have been called Terra Station or even MOOREGATE Station. Regardless, this station was a possible station, and so there doesn't seem to be any drawings of it available to the public at least. Since this station was merely a proposal and not a firmly accepted station, nothing was ever built for the station. There is a footbridge that crosses the tracks. However, this has nothing to do with the RT project as it predates the RT project, although maybe it would have been integrated into the station had it been built. The station would have also had no bus connections and would have predominantly served the local neighborhood. The next stop on the line would have been Lawrence East Station. This station would feature an off-street bus terminal to connect to the Lawrence East bus. You can also see that the original incarnation of the Scarborough RT would have used level crossings at intersections instead of realigning the roads to overpasses like what was eventually built. Traveling north, the next stop is a little tricky to pin down, since it may have been a mid-block station somewhere between Lawrence East and Ellesmere stations. The problem is there is only one east-west traveling street in this area, and the area itself is largely industrial. This leads me to one of two possibilities. The first is a short 180-meter extension of the road MULHAM Gate, as this is the only east-west traveling road in the area. This would put the station roughly about 740 meters south of Ellesmere, which I guess is alright for an LRT line. The other possibility is locating the station 200 meters south at an extension of the road Shropshire Drive, which currently ends 400 meters west at Kennedy Road. This would put the station roughly 1 kilometer south of Ellesmere and 800 meters north of Lawrence East, so about as mid-block as you can get in this case. Regardless, this station would have had no bus connections and would serve the industrial zone around it. I see this station having quite possibly the lowest passenger numbers on the line and even on the entire subway system had it been built. Traveling north once again, the next stop would be Ellesmere Station. Following what was established at Lawrence East, this station would have been at grade with an at-grade crossing of Ellesmere Road. Unlike Lawrence East Station though, this station would not feature an off-street bus terminal, instead connecting to the York Mills bus at roadside. This station would have also had a more basic looking design, probably similar to those that may have been built at Tara and MULHAM. Here at Ellesmere is where the line could have split into multiple possible alignments. For now though, we will follow the alignment that was ultimately used and come back to the alternate options later in the video. After Ellesmere, the line would then cross the C and Uxbridge subdivision somehow. It's not clear if the line would have gone underground like it does today or if it would have been elevated. Either way, after crossing the train tracks, the line would then head east, making its next possible stop at Midland. While Midland was ultimately built, it is worth noting that at the time it was only a proposed station like Tara and MULHAM, and not a done deal like Lawrence East and Ellesmere. The station, like its fully built counterpart, would have been elevated over Midland Avenue, although I must point out its unique architectural design for the station, and if I'm being honest, I prefer this design to the one that was ultimately built, but that's just my opinion. Here, the line would have connected to the Midland bus via an on-street connection, similar to Ellesmere. No off-street bus terminal was planned. The next stop may have been Brimley Station. Much like the proposed stations at Tara and MULHAM, not much is known about this proposal, although unlike the aforementioned stations, the idea of a Brimley station is one that never really went away. Even into the modern era and the Transit City LRT proposal, a stop at Brimley Road has been discussed, although it's never been built. The station would have connected to the Brimley bus via an on-street connection. No off-street terminal would have been built given its proximity to Scarborough Centre Station. The next stop would have been Scarborough Centre Station. Here, the line would connect with various TTC bus routes, GO bus routes, as well as the Scarborough Town Centre Shopping Mall and the Scarborough Civic Centre. This station design went through multiple revisions, with the first design being an at-grade station with walking access to the bus terminal next door and access to the mall and civic center via an overpass. The second design revision is closer to what was actually built, with the station being elevated over the bus terminal. That said, looking at the drawing, it seems this design was to have the station be 2 stories, with the bus terminal at the lower level and the streetcar platforms as well as the mall and civic center connection above. This is different from today where the station is 3 stories, with the RT platforms being above the mall and civic center access. Regardless, from here we come across another set of branching paths. From here, the line could have branched off into 2 possible paths, the first being further east towards Markham Road, and the other being northeast towards Malvern. Considering the idea was to bring the RT to Malvern and possibly into Pickering, the alignment to Markham Road to me doesn't seem like an alternate alignment, but may in fact have been a branch line. This would mean the Scarborough RT may have operated 2 services, one to Malvern and one to Markham Road, and possibly Centennial College one day. For now though, let's follow the Malvern alignment as that was the main one, and we'll get back to the Markham Road alignment later. Following the alignment towards Malvern on what was called the Malvern Highway alignment, the line looks like it would have made its next stop around what is today the intersection of CONSILLIUM Place and Corporate Drive. This station would have been elevated to get over Highway 401 and would have connected to the Bellamy and Progress buses as well as nearby office developments. From here, the line would follow Highway 401 for a short distance before breaking off around Markham Road and heading northeast to a stop at Progress Avenue and Milner Avenue. Here, the line would connect with the Progress bus and the Milner bus. This station would also line up the line with an abandoned railway right-of-way, which would be used to continue the line to Malvern Town Centre with a possible stop at Shepherd Avenue East. This abandoned right-of-way has always been important to the idea of the Scarborough RT and its eventual extension to Malvern, with it being brought up during the Transit City LRT plan most recently. For now though, let's head back to the Scarborough Centre Station and look at the Markham Road branch of the line. The Markham Road alignment to me doesn't stand out as an alternate alignment, but as a branch line. My reasoning for this, as previously stated, is the fact that the Scarborough RT was to go to Malvern Town Centre, and this alignment was planned to terminate at Markham Road, which would defeat the purpose of the line. Either way, the map says this branch of the Scarborough RT was to run at street level, that street being Progress Avenue. The first stop on this branch would have been Bellamy. Here, the line would have connected to the Bellamy bus and the Progress bus. Following Bellamy, the line would continue on street to Markham Road, the branch's terminus. Here, the line would connect with the Markham Road bus and the Progress bus. This alignment would also leave open the possibility of an eastward extension to Centennial College and maybe even Malvern in the end, since Progress Avenue from here travels north and would connect with the Malvern branch of the line at Milner, where the Milner station would be. In fact, this is roughly the alignment the Transit City LRT proposal would have followed to Malvern, minus some minor changes south of Bellamy and that line being elevated instead of on street. So that was a lot to take in, but we still have one more alignment to talk about. It's the alignment that branched off at Ellesmere Road. Now, unlike the branch to Markham Road, this alignment was an alternate alignment as stated on the map. For this alignment, it seems the line would run at street level along Ellesmere Road, thus facilitating the possible relocation of Ellesmere Station to the south side of the street. I believe the line would have run along Ellesmere Road to about what is today Borough Approach West. Here, the line would break off and travel a little north to a stop at the Scarborough Civic Centre. The stop would have a turnback loop, possibly for operational reasons, or maybe for branch services with some trains turning back here and heading back to Kennedy. Either way, this alignment isn't as centralized as the other that stops between the Civic Center and the mall, so I can see why this alignment was dropped. From here, the line would continue on its own right-of-way to the abandoned railway right-of-way that I mentioned a couple minutes ago. The line would make its next stop at Bellamy Road, this time a little south of the proposed station on the Markham Road branch. It is possible the line could have branched off to the Markham Road branch here north of the station at Progress Avenue, although we won't know if that was part of the idea. Either way, from here the line would continue on the alignment to the stop at Milner Avenue, where it would connect with the other proposed alignments and follow that through to the Malvern Town Centre. So after all of that, what happened? Obviously, the RT that was built and the one that the TTC envisioned are quite different. So what went wrong? If you need a breather after all that information, please feel free to take it because we haven't reached the bottom of this rabbit hole yet. So moving on. Around the time all that planning was going on, the province of Ontario was working on its own projects, one of these being Go Urban. For the purposes of this video, I won't go into much detail about Go Urban as it will get its own video. However, it was important to the events that would create the Scarborough RT we have today. As part of the Go Urban project, the Government of Ontario, through its Crown Corporation, the Urban Transit Development Corporation, or UTDC, partnered with the German Krauss Maffei AG to develop a new vehicle that would use magnetic levitation as its means of propulsion. This technology was dubbed the Intermediate Capacity Transit System, or ICTS, and was part of the Krauss Maffei AG's Trans-Urban project. This partnership, however, didn't last, as the West German government pulled their support and Krauss-Maffei AG was not able to continue the project. Just as an aside, Krauss-Maffei would go on to develop the Transrapid maglev, so in a way, Ontario played a role in the development of modern maglev technology. After this, the Ontario government was left to finish development of its ICTS technology on its own. When done, these trains would, as described by UTDC, consist of the following: steerable axle trucks for quiet, smooth rides and reduced maintenance, linear induction motors for improved all-weather performance without pollution, and computerized train operation for safety, reliability, and efficiency. When all was said and done, the province needed a guinea pig to test these trains out. At first, they proposed a project for Hamilton. However, that city rejected the proposal, so the province looked towards Toronto and the development of the Scarborough RT. Throughout 1980, the province lobbied Metro Toronto to change the design of the Scarborough RT from an LRT line to their proposed ICTS trains. The province stated that they would pay for any and all cost overruns of the project, and since the province was already paying for 3/4 of the TTC's capital costs and half of its operating costs, Metro Toronto really had no other option but to agree. In June of 1981, Metro Council agreed to change the Scarborough RT from a line using streetcars to a line using the province's ICTS trains. The change, as one would expect, led to cost overruns, with the line originally being projected to cost $103 million in 1981. Today, that's $276 million. However, by the time the line opened in March of 1985, the cost of the line had ballooned to $196 million, today $423 million. The TTC agreed to purchase 24 ICTS vehicles for the line, and various promotional events were held, including a full-scale mock-up of the trains at the St. Clair Car House and a naming contest for the vehicles. It is here where the RT moniker was given to the line. The first trains arrived at McCowan Yard on April of 1984. The line opened to the public on March 24, 1985, with considerable fanfare, with an estimated 30,000 people showing up for free opening day rides. So I won't go into the nitty-gritty details of the line today, since we already explored the line in the video, and the line pretty much follows the same alignment as the original proposal. The only differences being the lack of stations at Tara, MULHAM, and Brimley, and the homogenized architectural design of the stations on the line. As well, the line now terminates at McCowan Station, at the intersection of McCowan Road and Progress Avenue, with connections to the Bellamy bus and the Progress bus, but only in the westbound direction. There have been proposals to extend the line to Malvern via the abandoned railway right-of-way, with potential stops at Bellamy, Milner, Shepherd, and the Malvern Town Centre, essentially mirroring the previous proposals from the original streetcar project. The line is unique in that, at the moment, it is the only standard gauge line on the TTC network, with the rest of the subway and streetcar network using the TTC's unique gauge. This, however, will change when the Eglinton Crosstown opens, as that line will also be standard gauge. As well, the line uses what the TTC describes as a 5-rail system. These rails being the 2 running rails, the 2 power rails, one positively charged to 300 volts DC and the other negatively charged to 300 volts DC, for a total of 600 volts DC. I believe the separation of the power rails is to not interfere with the train's communication systems, with the negative current being fed through its own rail instead of the running rails like on most other steel-wheeled systems. The 5th rail is the magnetic rail, or reaction rail as it's called, which reacts with the train's linear induction motors to propel the train, or more accurately pull the train along the tracks. The line is also unique in that it is currently the TTC's only fully automated line, or at least is capable of full automation, as the line uses the CellTrack CBTC control system, which is today owned by the Thales Group, but was developed for Krauss-Maffei by Standard Electric Lorenz AG, or Cell. I won't talk about how CellTrack works in this video, and in fact there are CellTrack videos on YouTube that you can find. As for the Scarborough RT, it uses axle counters as its means of communication and not track-mounted transponders like are being installed over on Line 1 for its eventual automation. While the line is capable of full automation, trains still have a driver on board to operate the doors and sometimes operate the train. This is in contrast to places like Vancouver and Detroit, which use the same trains and technology but are also fully automated. The reason for Toronto still having a human on board can be chalked up to pressure from the union and apprehension from the public over driverless trains. When the line first opened, it would use 2-car trains during the off-peak hours and 4-car trains during the on-peak hours. This has since stopped as the line now runs 4 train cars exclusively. The line has been a source of problems since it opened, with it, or more specifically its trains, not living up to its expectations. The first and most impactful problem was the turning radius of the trains. As part of the original streetcar plan, the TTC built a turning loop at Kennedy Station. The province had stated their trains would be able to handle the tight curve of the loop given the small size of the individual cars, each car only being about 40 feet long. This, however, proved not to be the case, as sometime after opening a derailment occurred which forced the TTC to reduce the speed around the loop to 5 kilometers per hour. The TTC requested $27 million, today $51 million, to rebuild the turning loop and platforms at the station. The province, as previously agreed, would foot the bill for this, and so in 1988 the Scarborough RT was closed while Kennedy Station was renovated. When it reopened, Kennedy would now feature a switch at the east end of the station that would allow trains to reverse direction without the loop, and the eastbound platforms was extended over the now removed eastbound track, making Kennedy a single track station and the only one in the system to use the Spanish solution for boarding and alighting. A diamond crossover couldn't be built due to the tight 90-degree corner trains take to enter and exit the station from the northbound direction. While the loop is no longer used for active service, the TTC does sometimes leave out-of-service trains on it while they wait for clearance into the yard, and I have actually seen this done. Other problems for the line include its reliability in the winter months, with service often being shut down due to ice and snow buildup on the reaction rail. I believe the axle counters have also been sources of problems, since they can be fooled by debris on the tracks, such as wet leaves in the fall, causing trains to be stopped by the computer for something that isn't actually there. I don't think this happens often, but it can be a point of annoyance for both passengers and the TTC. Other problems include noise, with the line being quite loud, especially on the stretch between Midland and Scarborough Centre. This can be attributed to many factors, including the age of the trains, the motors being from a time when trains were generally louder, and I believe the rubber vibration dampeners under the rails have also worn out. Finally, there is also the issue of flat spots on the wheels. Now, this isn't a problem with the trains, but really with the operators. These trains have a strong braking system, which causes drivers, especially those new to them, to in essence pump the brakes to bring the trains to a stop instead of a single smooth motion. More experienced drivers tend to be far better at braking with these trains, although this problem could have been avoided entirely if there were no operators and instead the computer handled the movement of the trains. Remember, these trains were never designed to have human operators outside of emergency situations. There is also an operational issue with the line, specifically pertaining to Kennedy Station. Since Kennedy Station only has a single track for the line, that means that only one train can occupy the station at any given time. This acts as a bottleneck, limiting the line's maximum throughput, so any expansion of the line or the number of trains one may wish to run on the line would first have to address this issue. Now, I don't want to say we were given snake oil, since that implies we got conned and got something that didn't work at all. What we got works, it just doesn't work as well as advertised. Over the past 20 or so years, there has been discussion about the future of the line, with the first real major talks coming in 2006. That year, the TTC recommended that the Scarborough RT be upgraded to the ART Mark II trains, which were now being made by Bombardier after UTDC was sold to them in 1992. This upgrade would include an extension of the stations to fit the longer Mark II trains, a new yard, possibly around Bellamy in progress, as well as new, likely underground platforms at Kennedy, since the new trains may not have been able to handle the tight corners into the station. The tunnel north of Ellesmere between it and Midland would have also had to been rebuilt since its corner was too tight for the new trains. In total, this upgrade was expected to cost $190 million, today $361 million. Although that cost didn't include the rebuilt turn at Ellesmere, since the TTC didn't discover that until after the fact, according to transit advocate and historian Steve Monroe. The TTC would also purchase $170 million of new rolling stock for the aforementioned ART Mark II trains. Today that would cost around $323 million. So in total, this whole upgrade process would have cost around $360 million, today $684 million, and would have required an 8-month shutdown of the line. At the time, it is also important to know that the TTC did not view an extension of the subway from Kennedy to the Scarborough Town Centre as practical or affordable. Around this time, Toronto City Council under then Mayor David Miller supported his Transit City Plan, which among other things called for the Scarborough RT to be replaced with an LRT line. This LRT would follow the current Scarborough RT line but would instead use light rail vehicles. The line would include new platforms at Kennedy, a new yard around Bellamy and Progress, and an extension to the Malvern Town Centre with stops in between. The line would also connect to the proposed Sheppard East LRT and Scarborough Malvern LRT lines. At the time it was proposed in 2006, the line was expected to cost $490 million, that's about $933 million today, and require a 5-year shutdown of the Scarborough RT. If built, it was expected the line would open by 2015, with construction starting in 2010. By 2010, however, the Scarborough LRT project's days would be numbered, as then incoming Mayor Rob Ford would convince City Council to abandon that plan in favor of an extension of the subway to the Scarborough Town Centre. I won't go into much detail about that plan or the fiasco surrounding it, since that's a project that is still ongoing. As it stands now, the Scarborough RT is still up and running and is currently 35 years old. The vehicles have far outlived their 25-year shelf life, and the TTC has recently overhauled them, although even this recent overhaul is simply beating a dead horse, and the line's reliability continues to deteriorate. It currently looks like the line will be replaced by an extension of the subway, with the extension expected to open sometime between 2026 and 2028. Although this late opening date has called into question whether or not the current Scarborough RT can even survive another 6 to 8 years. As of 2020, a TTC report outlined 2 possibilities for the Scarborough RT, the first being another overhaul of the trains, or just closing the line entirely and shifting riders onto buses. This last option is quite ironic, given that one of the points pro-subway advocates would point out is that the conversion of the line to LRT would cause a multi-year shutdown of the line while the subway wouldn't. It seems though that buses are what Scarborough RT riders are going to get anyway, as I find it hard to believe the line can survive another 6 years of operation given its current state. I would like to point out that many will say the line should have been a subway to begin with, and while that's a fine opinion to have, that was not the reality of the situation going back to the line's origins in 1973. While politicians of the former city of Scarborough at the time would have liked the subway, they saw the high costs involved and decided that a cheaper solution was needed. This was a sentiment echoed by Metro Toronto and the planners at the TTC, who saw the need to bring rapid transit to places like Scarborough, but saw that a full subway would have been ill-advised. And once again, this was an idea that was agreed upon by Scarborough politicians at the time. Political interference, however, is the story of the Scarborough RT line. It started in the 1980s when the province changed the plan from an LRT line to a light metro that currently exists. It happened again in 2006 when City Council derailed the upgrade idea in favor of converting the line back into an LRT, and then once more in 2010 when Rob Ford managed to convince people that LRTs were bad and that only subways would suffice. The Scarborough RT's history is an interesting one, and is ultimately a tale of what happens when planning goes completely haywire. Ultimately though, the story of the Scarborough RT is coming to an end, and what we can now look forward to is what waits beyond it. Will it be a subway? Will it be an LRT again? Or will it just be nothing at all? But only time will tell. And with that, I will end this video. Thank you for watching this video, and if you liked it, hit that like button, and if you want to see more like it, hit that subscribe and bell button because I have more videos like this on the way. And if you have any comments you want to say about the Scarborough RT or this video or whatever have you, please don't be afraid to do that. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.